Hello, welcome back. Um, I've got my coffee. It's sunny, and I've had this urge to talk about writing for television, which various people have asked me over the years, why haven't you written for TV? You've published all these novels, all this fiction, and tie-in stuff, and I haven't written for TV. And yet, one of the things I specialize in is dialogue. I love the dialogue in my novels and writing characters just going at each other and talking and talking. And I love TV. I always wanted to write for TV. I grew up watching as much TV as possible. I was of that generation that thought TV was kind of real life. Um, and that was just, from lunchtime telly, coming home from school and watching Within These Walls and um, uh, Crown Court, like really serious TV drama at lunchtime, as well as Pipkins and Rainbow and those things. Anyway, the fact is, I did try out for television twice in the 90s, and they're both sagas, really, of being taken in by a world and then kind of spat out. I have to tell you, it happened in the summers of '95 and '96 when I was first freelancing as a novelist. When I sold my first novel in '95, my then agent had lots of contacts in TV and film, as agents should, and she sent the, the first proofs of my first novel, Marked for Life, about the tattooed man on the council estate and the missing child, all that kind of dramatic stuff. She sent it to all these producers and TV companies all over the place. And in '95, it turned out that Granada were looking for people to write for this late night soap. They were going to give opportunities to writers from different mediums. And it was Revelations, Russell T Davies's show, Revelations. And he was talked about already as somebody who was going to be a big mover and shaker. So my agent was very excited that of all the novels and all the things they read, I was one of the people they asked to go and talk to Russell and I think the producer of the show, I think that's right, Paul Marquis, who then went on to do Hollyoaks and all those kinds of shows. So this was '95, and I went to Granada. I knew Manchester a little bit as a student, but this was going into the heart of Granada studios, into the heart of Coronation Street. Um, and it was magical. I got the train. I was in Lancaster at that point, so it wasn't a long trek, but it was to this kind of haloed palace, and there was uh, the queue for people going to see the Coronation Street tour. There were members of the Corrie cast downstairs in the foyer, just knocking about, chatting. And I was whizzed up to this office on the third floor, and here's these larger than life gay men in charge of a TV show, blustering up and down the corridors, shouting at the top of their voices and camping it up, and terrifying people. And they were full of kind of righteous power. When you talk to the people in charge of this show, they Russell and this fella Paul, it was, we know TV, we know what people um, want to watch, and we know the way. And it was good to watch the kind of the old guard scuttling away in the wake of these, away from these kind of huge, very camp figures. Now I was, what was I, 24, 25. I'd never seen anything like it. Of course, I'd been in the kind of books world, and that was a lot more demure than the kind of brash world of TV. And I felt not taken in under their wing by any means, but I was interviewed, and they took me out to Pizza Express for lunch, and I was asked about my love of soaps and my love of Corrie, and Russell at one point said, "Are you a Doctor Who fan?" And I disavowed the Doctor, and so did he at that point. Oh, I used to be, but not anymore. I've stopped reading the novels even, and we both said that. And then within 2 years, we were both, writing Doctor Who novels and so on. So it was, and we had lots of people in common through Doctor Who, through the world of writing. So it was a kind of high old time, really. Anyway, weeks and weeks went by, and I was going up and down. I'd moved to Edinburgh at some point in that summer, and I would come down to Granada and get these storylining documents, and you'd have your own episode. I met the other writers, we had meetings, we had lunch in the Granada building, and you felt part of this amazing enterprise, really. And there's some lovely people there. I remember a woman called Aisha, who was a writer for EastEnders, and she was really nice. And this fella called Ed, who just got out of prison, and he was writing for it, different voices. And he was really funny. We became pals, and I would wait for him in the queue at the probation office on Canal Street. We'd go out drinking, and he'd go and have his probation meeting, and then we'd go and have beans on toast at Piccadilly. Anyway, I had to write this particular episode, and we got the storylining document, which tells you what has to be in every single scene. Now, this is my big mistake. When they told us, play the subtext in every scene, I completely misunderstood what they meant. I thought play the subtext meant good writing. Everything I'd been taught and learnt was good writing, which was hide the subtext. Whatever subtext the characters have, they will never say it. They will talk about everything else, and it's the reader or viewer's job to unearth it, to infer what's going on. Drafts went by. I would come up and down to Manchester and have these meetings, and my meetings became more and more fraught with the producer and his boss, another producer. And I was aware after a few meetings that Russell wasn't at the meetings anymore, and I think I was being cut off as my scripts became wider and wider of the mark, I think. It turned out they meant characters have to say exactly what's on their mind to each other. And when we went to meetings, other people's characters were saying things like, I'm really angry at you because blah, blah, blah. And the other one would say, oh, well, I'm angry at you because blah, blah, blah. That's doing a disservice, I'm sure. But it seemed quite on the money. And that's how they were doing it. And it was a kind of revelation to me. Oh, that's what it's meant to be. By which time it was too late. And I was out. I wrote about all this in my journals, and there's this terrible meeting when I just met the producer in Key Street in Manchester and was sacked. It wasn't working out. Russell will write your episode for you. He'll rescue it. It'll be okay, but you're out the door. So my idea of, progressing through Granada and maybe one day writing things that I loved, like Coronation Street, were completely gone. And I realized many years later that it was a kind of test in a way. Can you do exactly what you're told to fit in with a show? And the answer was no, I could just write it as me. And, bless him, Russell did write an email many years later saying, I hope you haven't carried that with you all those years. Yes, I had. I felt very demoralized and horrified by the whole thing, that I'd messed it up so badly. And he said that the thing is, you've got a Paul Mars-shaped brain and you should only write your stuff. Well, so it goes. As Kurt Vonnegut would say, my golden chances went. Anyway, the next year, I did the same thing again. Unbelievably, I managed to get auditioned for the BBC by Jed Mercurio, another rising star of the 90s. And he was doing a science fiction show called Invasion Earth. And they interviewed 30 science fiction writers. And it was him and his producer who went on to do all sorts of interesting things as well. And we went to White City, and I was interviewed about, I guess it would have been Does It Show by then, my second novel imprint. Maybe it was Mark for Life still. They were magical realist novels set on council estates, but I had great interest in science fiction. Mostly they interviewed proper science fiction writers and the people who got the jobs. Stephen Baxter was a proper science fiction writer, is a proper science fiction writer. He got a job, an episode or two to write. this nice fella called Alex, whose surname I forget. He got an episode to write, and so did I. So I was amazed, and it was very convivial. Every other week, we would convene at White City in a meeting room and have lunch and have an afternoon. Jed Mercurio, Stephen Baxter, this nice fella Alex, and me brainstorming what would happen if aliens invaded Earth, if aliens came from a fourth dimension, the nth dimension, into our world. What would happen? How would the world fight back? Could the world fight back? It's a very, very pleasurable way to spend the summer of 1996, up and down to London every other week from Edinburgh, and make up plans for an alien invasion. The one thing we were told we couldn't do was make it like Doctor Who. Jed Mercurio was very down on Doctor Who, and he said, all those old-fashioned stories about UNIT and the Brigadier and fighting aliens, all that such old hat, you'll never see the likes of that again. That's all gone. This has to be serious. It has to be properly military and Air Force, and our hearts sank. You could see that Stephen Baxter and Alex were complete Doctor Who fans, and we would commiserate with each other. This was the time of the Paul McGann TV movie, and we talked about that, and it was kind of rudely dismissed. It'll never be, it'll never take off. Of course, it didn't at that time in that form, although we really wanted it to. And we'd rather have been writing that than Invasion Earth. I was given the episode in which a town in Scotland is infected by a terrible virus, and our heroes, who are kind of a bit X-Filesy, there's a doctor and military men and Secret Service, all go there to see if this town can be closed down and shut off. Can it go into lockdown? Which is interesting now, looking back. And then there's a talk of a antidote, and people are made to queue up. First of all, they're tested. There's queues and queues of people being tested in this town. Scenes, as I wrote them, exactly like what happened, it turned out, during COVID. Those cars pushing towards the testing centre and people having things shoved up their noses. When the antidote came, it was in the form of sugar cubes that people were given to swallow. And of course, it wasn't an antidote. The military had decided that the whole town had to die in this episode, and so they're given poison. So it's, a bit Jonestown Massacre by the end of it. Very dark. And I loved writing all of that because it brought the whole thing, which had been a bit star-spanning and a bit military and a bit fighty-fighty, down to earth. And my episode was an hour of people worrying about this huge pandemic. I focused on two old ladies, and a good part of the episode was spent inside a mobile portable loo as they sat either side on the loo, waiting to go and be tested, I think, for this alien virus. They told me to add some action, so at one point I had some terrible creature coming up through the toilet and doing something terrible. Then it escapes into a cafe and kills people. And they were fun to write, those scenes. But mostly my episode was old ladies in queues talking about because they get tested by having a pee. They've got to do a pee test at some point. I can't go, Effie, somebody said, through the wall of the toilets. How can you pee when the whole world is waiting? So that was my episode of Invasion Earth. Everybody else's episodes were a bit more, fighter planes from the past coming into the present, having dogfights with spaceships, people with guns, stuff going on. It was all a bit more TV drama, I suppose, as it is now. Anyway, mine didn't go down particularly well. What have you done? But I thought they wanted the contrast, and it was very much me. And again, I'd made the dreadful mistake of writing as me. And at one point, after weeks and weeks of this episode going backwards and forwards, I had a meeting with just the producer who said, we're taking you off this, and Jed will rewrite it, and we'll pay you off. And that was the end of that. That was the end of Invasion Earth. So those were my two forays into TV writing, when both times I I just didn't manage to be somebody else. I wrote things as myself. The thing that I'd been told from the very beginning of writing anything, you absolutely have to be. You can't write as anybody else. It has to be you. That's what the world of books always values. It's what readers value. And yet when you hear people who work in TV, that's what they value as well, the writer's voice. For some reason I was involved in two schemes where that wasn't what they wanted whatsoever. And I just can't toe the line. Since then, books have become more like that, that you're not meant to sound just like you. At least in some quarters, you get told that. So it's a long and kind of complicated history that was curtailed. I watch lots of my kind of peers go into that world and do very well, and sometimes it's kind of a bit galling, because I thought, I could write that stuff, I still could. But we'll see. One day, maybe. Although I suddenly realise sometimes that decades have gone past. It's like some terrible science fiction thing in itself. And decades have gone past. I'm no longer in my mid-20s. And I think about that lad, really, that I was in my mid-20s with one novel out, going to London, going to the BBC, going to Manchester and Granada with all that hope and all that talent, and all that energy. And I do feel a bit taken up and dropped and yeah, a bit kind of stampeded over, really. And is it any wonder, that you end up with no ambition left? Well, sometimes it can feel like you've got no ambition left when you've been trampled on. I do feel a bit trampled on, really, when I think about it, about things like the books that I've done and the things that I've been involved in. But en route, I've met some very interesting people and had some amazing conversations. To hear Russell in '95 saying, "Oh, I used to be a Doctor Who fan," and to hear Stephen Baxter talk, all afternoon about what an alien invasion might look like and how he really wanted it to be like Unit in the 1970s. All those things are worth doing. I just wish they'd been more open to my voice and the things that I would write about. And I still think my episode of the two ladies trying to pee is in the midst of an alien invasion would still be worth seeing. Anyway, that's a bit of a explanation, really, of the time that I tried to write for TV. Of course, over the years, I've written other stuff and had meetings and seen people and sent them things for years and years and years. And those haven't quite worked out. I remember once taking advice and getting it was Red Productions a couple of years ago, and I'd written a script and I was given the name of somebody to send it to, and I made the mistake of writing in the covering letter, "Oh, this might be a bit small scale and domestic and intimate, but please, consider this." And the letter I got back said, "We find this too small scale, intimate," and it was exactly my words. They'd literally cut and paste I set myself up for a fall there, I think. I like small scale, intimate, and the rest of it. I much prefer that to all the kind of overblown stuff, shall we say, the kind of heightened drama that we get. Anyway, that's me on TV. I'm a watcher of TV. I still am, and I still love TV drama, and I think I know how to do it. I guess I know how I would do it. Is what I know. Anyway, I'm going to go now. Talk again soon in the next episode. Bye.